Monad charity house. Remember? We're best friends.
A mad king, ensconced in the Estelle Opera House, sits upon his throne and commands puppets in destruction. These mechanical constructs were once thought incapable of inflicting harm, but under the king's influence they rave against the proscriptions of the Grand Covenant and deliver Krot's ruin. At first glance, the King of Puppets is the greatest adversary facing Geppetto's creation, and it's charged to save what remains of the city. But just as his massive armor hides a lifelike puppet within, so too does the king's story hide greater significance. The tragedy of Romeo King is that his will won out too late, and, unable to stay the hand of Geppetto's puppet, he is destroyed. But his truth still lingers, and it's thrust upon us to understand it in its entirety, to learn of the malevolence that commanded him unwillingly, and to end it before Krot suffers further torment. Geppetto's puppet awakens on a rail car in Krot Central Station, surrounded by blood and madness. Puppets, which had for years been bound by the tenets of the Grand Covenant to obey and serve humans, are gripped by frenzy and now slaughter indiscriminately. None know how or why they broke from their chains, but all blame as instigator the mysterious King of Puppets. The genius Giuseppe and magnate Lorenzini Vanini both believe the king dangerous beyond understanding, a puppet that not only liberated himself from the Covenant, but who also spread his infectious freedom to automatons across the city.
So, the King of Puppets, how did he get around the Covenant, I wonder? He used the ergo wavelengths, but what did he do to their consciences?
The King of Puppets' lair is on Rosa Isabel Street. Perhaps the puppet frenzy will come to an end if we can take down their king.
Though they can't comprehend his motives, they urge us to confront the king, to put an end to the puppet frenzy. But it's not within us, endowed with our own liberty and consciousness, to carry out our charge without question. Indeed, as we approach the king's throne, we plumb deeper into the mystery within the madness. The parade leader, the scrapped watchman, the king's flame, his great lieutenants all speak to us in a puppet language indecipherable. Are they merely taunting us, or do they wish to convey a message? The king, too, once challenged, puts on an elaborate and enigmatic play with grim foreboding on his stage that includes a likeness of Geppetto ripping the P organ, our symbolic heart from us, his puppet creation. Locked in battle, he screams in the puppet language unknown. Whether in frenzied madness, in deception, in authenticity, the king has something to share that may cast profound light on his purpose, as well as our own. The King of Puppets wasn't always king, nor was he always puppet. He once lived and breathed many years ago as a human named Romeo. Orphaned at a young age, Romeo found himself under the auspices of the esteemed Monad charity house on the Rose estate, from where great craftsmen, stalkers, and alchemists emerged. Romeo had courage in his heart and a strong sense of justice. He wished to defend the helpless, so dreamed of becoming a stalker and swordmaster. Evidence of this skill remains in the puppet Romeo's blistering attacks. The boy shared in his daydreams and desires with another who found their way to the charity house, Giuseppe Geppetto's son, Carlo. Carlo often lingered in the house while his father toiled in his workshop, and the two boys grew close with the years. Great memories they had and happy days, which distracted Carlo from his bitter family life. This we hear in the item description of someone's necklace. The boy resented his father for not showing any interest in him. Perhaps in protest, he gave his graduation necklace to Romeo, a friend he admired. But those light-filled days came to a horrible end. The Monad house in Rose Estate were the target of a sinister plot by alchemist Simon Manus to wrest control of the organization from Valentinus Monad. He released a virulent strain of the petrification disease, a sickness that locks the soul in stone and scales the body over as organs lose function, infecting all inside, including the now young adults Romeo and Carlo. The stone sickness is a death sentence, and the boys look upon each other without hope for a cure. Carlo is the first to perish, and in his own death throes, Romeo seeks an opportunity to make good on his dream of fighting for the downtrodden. In dire straits, he makes a solemn decision hinted at in the text of a loading screen which reads, "Even as his body was hardening from the petrification disease, he made a deal with the devil to save more people." But what deal, and with which devil? Romeo knows well the skill and renown of Giuseppe Geppetto, a master puppet maker who crafts experimental drafts of mechanical hearts that can house ergo, the essence of the soul, and be stored as fuel cells within an automaton. It's the promise of life beyond death, and a temptation Romeo can't resist. As his physical being dies, Romeo begs Geppetto to transfer his ergo into a puppet, to make him anew and grant him a second life. One can understand a young man's desire to cheat an early end, and this is motive enough. But Romeo wishes to return so that he can save the people of Krat from not just petrification disease, but the alchemists, for he wonders at their fault in the Rose Estate incident. Unfortunately for Romeo, not everyone's heart is as pure. The boy inadvertently places himself at Geppetto's mercy, who has his own intentions for the alchemists, for Krat, and for the return of his son Carlo. Marionette strings fetter a naive Romeo to sinister plots. Romeo's tragedy unfolds with the purpose of his new life. As a puppet, he's designed not to protect humans, but to harm them. Geppetto circumvents the laws of the Grand Covenant that bind puppets to docile servitude and programs the insidious Law Zero, that all puppets must obey their creator Giuseppe Geppetto without question.
The laws of the Grand Covenant bind us. We're his puppets. Law Zero. The creator's name is Geppetto. Giuseppe Geppetto.
None know Geppetto's subterfuge. With the master switch in his hands, he instigates the puppet frenzy. Tied to Giuseppe's strings, all puppets turn on humans. Krat's streets run slick with blood, and massive amounts of ergo are liberated to fuel Geppetto's P organ and resurrect his son Carlo. Romeo is set up as Geppetto's dupe. He's adorned with the armor and livery of a king, forced to take the Estelle Opera House as his throne, and act as a demented mastermind. He is the scapegoat to cast all suspicion for the puppet frenzy away from Geppetto. But something bizarre that Giuseppe couldn't have predicted emerges as ghosts in the circuitry. Puppets across Krat start demonstrating personalities, acting against their coding, and recalling the memories of the dead. The ergo crystals within their metal bodies contain very real souls that once were human, and as the ergo awakens, a puppet is reconnected with their past self. They awaken in ego. This is mentioned in many dialogues and in the lore of Krat, as this loading screen states. The Grand Covenant forces puppets to serve humans. However, there are a few puppets in Krat that have broken free of the Grand Covenant and which act according to their own volition. With little time to spare, Romeo's consciousness awakens within the King of Puppets. He's disoriented. His metal frame is saturated in blood, and the avenues of Rosa Isabel Street are aflame with destruction. Realization soon dawns that under the influence of another, Romeo committed untold atrocities and slew those he wished to defend. The ego within bucked against such flagrant abuse, and Romeo severed his ties to Geppetto's Law Zero. This we hear recounted in the Burnt White King's ergo description. When the boy opened his eyes, he found himself sitting on a throne that he had not asked for. When he sought his friend of the past, he clung to his memories, even though he knew there was no going back. Hope to end the madness yet rests in the recently awakened puppet, fashioned in Carlo's likeness. Romeo's mission is simple yet daunting. Resist. On all sides, he's besieged by the alchemists, the stone sickness, the carcass monsters, and Geppetto's frenzied puppets. He requires allies to save what remains of the city. Using ergo wavelengths to speak directly to Krot's puppets, the king makes his plea and is answered. Romeo's reason renders Rule Zero void within a contingent of puppets who are now won over to the king's cause. But better than conversion is construction. With Fiocco, the fiery overseer of Vanini's puppet factory, Romeo initiates production of a new line of puppets bound to share his vendetta. In the King's Flame ergo description, we hear that to Fiocco, the ordinary puppet, protecting the factory's fire was a sacred duty. As soon as he learned of the king of puppets, he bowed down to a new god. With an army of metal at his disposal, the king of puppets wages war upon his enemies. He seeks survivors and safeguards areas of the city not yet lost to disaster. As Romeo gathers power, he sends messengers to Geppetto's puppet, wishing to rouse the memory of Carlo buried deep within the metal cogs, and convince him to stand in defiance of the mastermind Geppetto. But the puppet language is mysterious and harrowing is the journey. Many such messengers are destroyed or else consumed by the puppet frenzy, their warning construed and twisted. This we hear in the parade leader's ergo description. Although the entire audience disappeared in a pool of blood, the parade master was cheerful. As long as there's a king, the show must go on. One by one, Romeo's lieutenants fall to the puppet's blade, and Romeo's truth turns increasingly dire. Eventually, even he is unable to dispel the illusion, to shatter the lies and reach Carlo. The king of puppets is consumed by flame. It would seem those puppets tied to his cause share in Romeo's emotion and have awakened parts of their own humanity. For after his defeat, the puppets he rallied lay down their arms in anguish and despondency. We are unable to see through Geppetto's lies, nor do we possess the means of decoding the Puppet King's solemn warning until he's already vanquished. Only by continuing into New Game Plus are we enlightened to Romeo's misfortune and his true motives. The parade master, the King's Flame, weren't sent to thwart our mission, but as Romeo's couriers, calling from beyond to awaken P's ego, to stir Carlo to action. And again, at the gates of St. Frangelico Cathedral, we see the puppets that Romeo has turned against Geppetto act at the king's behest to liberate Krot's survivors, barricaded within from terrible carcass monsters. Without the decoder, we misconstrued their intent. Sorrow culminates in our fight against the king himself, when Romeo must confront the likeness of his closest childhood friend, and knowing that Carlo might truly be lost, vow to put an end to Geppetto's puppet, and with it, the craftsman's cruelty.
I have to kill you to stop it all. There's no other way.
He fights with remorse, but with grave necessity. No strike is stayed, for failure means victory of madness over reason, and continuation of the puppet frenzy. Upon our death, he asks who truly is the puppet, referring to the possibility that though we may not be bound by the covenant, Geppetto still has us dancing to his strings. It's an impossible decision, the binding choice of which he is freed from upon our victory. This line, tragic and poignant, highlights the anguish of Romeo's existence and Geppetto's betrayal of faith.
This is what real freedom feels like. Thank you, Carlo.
Against his will, he was made a monster. Now, he's finally free, not just in body, but in soul. His ergo released to the wind. So ends the tragic tale of Romeo, King of Puppets. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Let me know your thoughts on Romeo, which boss you think is most difficult or interesting, as well as your own insights and suggestions for future videos in the comments below. And if you're a fan of lore and storytelling, be sure to subscribe to the channel, check out the podcast where content is uploaded frequently. I want to thank my amazing supporters over on Patreon who make all of this possible, and I couldn't do it without their fantastic support. If you'd like to become a lore luminary for access to me, a great community, written scripts, and early video drops, head to patreon.com/thelorebrarians to learn more. Until next time, go forth and explore the lore.